We'll see if we can squeeze it in now. Ryanair's controversial seating policy, which can see groups who book tickets together seated separately unless they pay for allocated seats, is set to be scrutinised by an industry watchdog. The UK's Civil Aviation Authority has launched a review into airline seating practices, and they'll examine whether families are deliberately being split up when they fly. This review comes as the budget airline announced plans to return €750 million to shareholders. Good news in their latest results. With me now, Eoghan Corry, editor of Travel Extra. Eoghan, thanks indeed for coming in. Tell us about this review carried out by the Civil Aviation Authority.
It's a very interesting one. It's come around in the last few weeks. A survey commissioned by the CAA showed a lot of complaints. They didn't name Ryanair in their investigation, but it's quite clear they're the ones they're after. The 40% of the people surveyed felt they should be allowed to sit together without having paid for the priority boarding. The CA won't come at it as an entitlement. They'll come and say that when you have children and parents, the airline should do everything to facilitate them sitting together. Ryanair at the moment charges, if you want 3 adults to sit together, 3 adults have to pay the extra. It varies from €2 to €10. But if you have a parent with children, they only charge once. They say that's sufficient. The CA will be querying that.
But why not facilitate people? That's the CA's question, isn't it?
Basically, Ryanair say the whole point of priority boarding is that if you haven't paid for it, you don't get to sit together, you don't get an allocated seat, you take the lottery. Listeners will remember that's what happened with every Ryanair passenger. Stampede boarding, we just all gathered our bags and charged on board. They've introduced this and they charged for it, and they've a point. Why charge for it if people are entitled to sit together?
So what do other airlines do then, Eoghan?
Almost everybody has been following this. This was introduced in America obviously long ago. Everybody got an allocated seat, but when the low-cost model arrived, they saw it as a way of probably making money, but also facilitating the boarding and unboarding of aircraft. There's no doubt if you don't have allocated seats, you're on the aircraft faster and you're off it faster. Ryanair's entire business model is built on the 25-minute turnaround. The plane lands, everybody off, everybody on again. Very simple. It started getting complicated when he started putting in allocated seating, so he charges for it. Almost every airline is following this, and the real reason that the UK, Andrew Haynes, who heads up the CAA in England, is chasing Ryanair is that they're the biggest. There's also a lot of previous, it has to be said, between Haynes and Ryanair. He was the one who chased them down very seriously last September over their pilot rostering, and he chased down Aer Lingus previously. And there is a sort of a mood in Irish aviation that he's much more rigorous dealing with Irish airlines than the ones he's supposed to regulate, which are the British ones.
It is a UK body, as you say, the CAA. Could it force Ryanair to change its seating policy?
Ryanair will play ball with all the regulatory authorities. Ryanair's very unusual, Sean. Almost every airline has one big country that they're based in. Ryanair will have about 15% of its market in the UK, in Spain, in Italy, and it's going to grow to that in France and Germany. So it's pan-European. It's probably the first pan-European, but that doesn't mean that it can turn its back at any stage on any one of those regulators. And it will play ball. It's also got Brexit looming. It's registered a brand in England, a licence in England, so it can operate in England after Brexit. So it won't be shunning the UK regulator, but at the same time, I expect if it runs into problem, it will do what Ryanair does and tie it up in the legals for about 2 years.
Yeah, and presumably then we shouldn't be holding our breaths if we were looking for a change in the policy.
It's not going to change. I mean, listeners will know last Easter we hit a tipping point where the number of people booking on Ryanair for allocated seating reached a certain point that the people who were used to sitting together found they were no longer sitting together. You could have cooked your lunch on the Joe Duffy programme when Michael O'Leary appeared on it shortly after that. A lot of anger, but Michael O'Leary will not be changing this. His whole point is it doesn't cost much, €2, €5, €10, depending on when you book. And if you want your allocated seat, it's not a lot of money considering your fare. Their results this morning, by the way, say fares will fall 3%.
Yeah, interestingly, I mean, this, like the last quarter of last year, the 3 months months to the end of December. 12% increase in profits, coinciding with all the fuss and kerfuffle over uncertainty about and thousands of flights being cancelled because of the pilot shortage.
The growth slowed, Sean. The growth was running at around 10%. It's growing at 6%. He grounded, he says it was a painful decision. In the report, he grounded 25 aircraft. But their profits aren't very large. This is interesting time of the year. A European airline will generally lose money in winter. This is Michael and the amazing technicolour dreamcoat. He builds up 6 months of plenty in summer, and then they sit out the winter. The very fact he's turning in 100 million of a profit is quite interesting, and they're still on course for that phenomenal 1.3 billion profit. He's also talking about bringing passenger numbers past 130 million up to 135, and in 6 years' time flying 200 million passengers a year. It's a huge target.
Part of that expansion, they're expanding operations into the Middle East.
A very interesting one, this. Jordan, you don't get 25-minute turnarounds in Tel Aviv, where he's already arrived, and in Jordan. It's quite clear that the growth opportunities he saw in Europe have largely been exploited. He's looking for new markets all the time. And Jordan, obviously very thirsty for tourists. They've been hit badly by politics in the region. And I would imagine there was a big incentive to Ryanair. And Ryanair's history is when they fly in, they do deliver the numbers. 14 routes, none of them from Ireland. It's a bit too far as a sector length from Ireland. But I wouldn't rule it out happening in the future.
Okay, Eoghan Corry.
Thank you very much, Sean. Apologies for the voice.
Travel, actually, I think you got something overnight. Eoghan Corry, thank you indeed for talking to us.